If I say it once, I say it 1,000 times. It's all about knowing. Once you know, they can't fuck with you. It's all about knowing. Know your history. Know where it comes from. If you know where it comes from, you don't know where you're going. There's a clip here about Barbados and how they used to work on trying to escape without doing the work as slaves. A small clip on Barbados about slavery. Check it out, family. Check it out. Here we go. Here we go.
People of African origin than the combined population of England's 5 other Caribbean colonies, including Jamaica. Barbados' slave population exploded. By that time, Barbados had more people of African origin than the combined population of England's 5 other Caribbean colonies, including Jamaica. They even surpassed the total African-descended population in England itself. In Barbados, slaves resisted their conditions aggressively. They would slow down their work, pretend to be sick, or even revolt. While some would take short breaks without permission, others tried to escape for good. This act of escaping, often called marronage, was common in Barbados and other places where slavery existed. The act of escaping wasn't just about being absent without permission. It impacted the entire system of slavery by reducing the workforce, taking away valuable labor, and essentially denying the master's control over what he saw as his property. Escaped slaves were dangerous, as their actions could inspire or motivate other slaves to rebel. They survived by foraging and stealing, and were a real concern for slave owners. Their very existence upset the social balance, serving as potential role models for the larger enslaved community. In this video, we will discuss the history of slave escapes on the island of Barbados. We will learn how they started, the escape strategies they used, and how they adjusted their tactics as the times changed to make sure they could get free and hopefully stay free. In the beginning,
this melty white
Barbados was a densely forested country with thick bushes covering many parts of the island. In the early days of plantation slavery, some slaves formed small groups hiding within these woods and raided plantations for food. The exact origins of these groups remain unclear, but it's believed that most slaves initially escaped alone or with one partner to later join them. Some might have stayed hidden individually, while others shifted between solitude and group membership. Now, before we go any further, let's establish something. Research shows that there was a certain type or profile of the slave that typically is more likely to want to escape. The characteristics of the ones likely to want to escape include the following. First, the majority were males who were born in the Caribbean. Most were in their 20s or early 30s. Additionally, many were skilled or semi-skilled workers. They knew a trade, skill, or had a vocation. Notably, the typical escaped slave originated from plantations or rural areas. Finally, mixed-race individuals made up a large number of escapees, especially towards the end of slavery in Barbados. Over the years, most escaped slaves, either alone or in tiny groups of maybe 2 or 3, sought shelter in natural hideouts. As early as 1648, there are records of an English visitor to Barbados saying they saw, quote, unquote, many hundreds of rebel Negro slaves in the woods. In 1657, the English author, historian, and one-time slave owner Richard Ligon wrote,
Sightings are very frequent, some small, others extremely large and capacious. The runaway Negroes often shelter themselves in these coverts, and in the night range abroad the country and steal pigs, plantains, potatoes, and pudding, and bring it there, and feast all day upon what they stole the night before. And the nights being dark and their bodies black, they escape undiscerned.
Even today, you can find many caves scattered across Barbados. Additionally, the island's parishes are filled with forested gullies. Maroons would hide in these places often for long periods, and their activities were perceived as menacing and unlawful. These Maroons were also elusive. They'd switch hiding spots frequently, making it tough to locate them unless caught by surprise. By the late 1600s, changes in Barbados's environment led to fewer forests. This made it harder for Maroons to form big groups and stay hidden for a long time. Also, the once hidden caves became easier for patrols to reach. So, by the end of the 1600s, large groups of escaping slaves pretty much slowed down significantly. These changes, however, made the slaves more resourceful, and they adapted their strategies to stay a step ahead. Before we learn more about how they adjusted, let us learn about the different types of escape. There were two main types of marronage, or slave escapes, in Barbados. The first type is called petit marronage. This type involved slaves running away for a short time. They might leave to visit a loved one on a nearby plantation, steal a bit of food, or just take a break from their harsh lives. These slaves usually stayed close to where they came from and sometimes returned on their own or were captured and brought back quickly. Grand marronage. In this type, slaves escaped with the intent of never coming back. Early on in Barbados, some slave groups tried this, aiming to stay free as long as they could. However, given Barbados's geography and population, forming large permanent runaway communities like those in places like Jamaica was challenging. So while these Maroons, or runaway slaves, wanted to be free forever, they knew they might be captured but still tried to enjoy their freedom while it lasted. In simple terms, petit marronage was like a short break or temporary escape, while grand marronage was an attempt at permanent freedom. Since it was now more challenging to survive on their own, relying on nature and their skills to get necessities, they started working together. Slaves who had not escaped would start helping other escaped slaves, often providing shelter and assistance. As early as 1661, laws were updated to include searching slave houses for hidden escapees. These searches indicate that slaves harboring Maroons was a common occurrence. Apart from shelter and food, escaped slaves were also given things like forged letters to help them remain free. As more slaves learned to read and write, they used this knowledge to create fake documents, making it harder to catch escapees. Escaped slaves needed to be able to maintain their independence and earn money if they ever wanted to have any hope of being able to remain free. When living in the bush wasn't an option anymore, escaped slaves developed a new escape strategy, one that they hoped would help them not only get free, but stay free. Living
New Nariva Memory 3D.
densely populated urban areas was the next escape strategy. Slaves, whether looking for a short break or a permanent escape from plantations, were increasingly drawn to towns, especially Bridgetown, the capital of the island. Towns provided numerous advantages. Firstly, with employment. In towns, skilled slaves could find more work opportunities. Also, as an avenue of escape, those wanting permanent freedom benefited from the fact that towns offered chances to connect with ship captains who might take them abroad. Finally, they loved the anonymity. In the bustling urban areas, slaves could blend in and pretend to be free. This trend was common not just in Barbados, but in other colonies too. Newspaper ads at the time often highlighted this. Owners would describe escaped slaves as being crafty or good at pretending to be free. For instance, some slaves were so articulate or had such fair complexions, they could easily be mistaken for free men or even white individuals. Over time, more escaped slaves or Maroons headed to towns trying to blend in as freedmen. This increase was also due to the growth of the free community in the early 19th century, especially in Bridgetown. Escaped slaves were also drawn to areas around St. Anne's garrison where British military and naval forces were stationed. By the late 18th century, this garrison area became a popular spot for vagabond and runaway blacks, as stated by the governor. The attraction of St. Anne's garrison for Maroons might have been the presence of black troops from the West India regiments. The Maroons could easily mix with the slaves and freedmen who were there to serve the needs of the military. This made it easier for Maroons to hide and even possibly be sheltered by the soldiers themselves. By the early 19th century, some Maroons joined the West India regiments posing as freedmen. Still, there were some slaves for who just simply escaping wasn't enough. For them, they had to leave Barbados and settle elsewhere to truly feel free. They wanted to never again have to look over their shoulder and start a brand new life. These are the ones who decided to take to the sea. Throughout the Caribbean, there was a significant trend of escapes by boat, termed maritime marronage by Jamaican historian Neville Hall. In Barbados, many escaped slaves hiding in places like Bridgetown were waiting for such escape opportunities. Later, direct evidence emerged about slaves escaping to nearby islands which were under French control using stolen boats. Some slaves might have had access to these boats due to their roles as fishermen or boatmen. Later accounts also mention slaves, particularly those with nautical skills, escaping via stolen boats to destinations as distant as the British Leeward Islands. The beautiful island of St. Vincent, located approximately 100 miles west of Barbados and known as a stronghold for Caribs, had become a sanctuary for escaped slaves by the 1660s, if not earlier. In 1668, Barbados's Governor Willoughby entered into a treaty with several Carib chiefs. According to the treaty, the Caribs agreed to return escaped slaves from Barbados, both those who had previously fled and any future escapees. By early 1676, it's estimated that St. Vincent housed around 600 escaped slaves, some of whom had run away from Barbados and others from different locations. In 1700, Father Labat, a French priest, visited St. Vincent. He observed that the island's population was not just Carib Indians, but also included, as he put it,
a very great number of fugitive Negroes, for the most part from Barbados, which, being to windward, gives the runaways every possible facility for escaping from their masters' plantations in boats or on piperies or rafts and taking refuge among the savages. The number of Negroes on St. Vincent has increased to such an extent, either by those born in the country or by those come from Barbados to join them, that it much surpasses that of the Caribs.
Over time, slaves developed various strategies to board ships and escape from Barbados, with many skilled slaves, such as tradesmen, being hired out by their owners. These individuals had relatively more freedom to move, especially in towns. An example is William, a 27-year-old mulatto man who was seen in St. Lucia after his escape from Barbados, claiming he was working to buy his freedom. Another tactic, which became possible with the rise of the freedman population by the late 18th century, was to falsely claim freedom and negotiate passage with a ship's captain. A notable case from 1802 involves a British naval vessel's captain accused of enticing slaves to board his ship. He defended himself by saying the slaves had approached him, asserting they were free and offering their services. Some slaves might have used money they had saved from being hired out or through trade to pay for their passage. Others might have directly bribed ship captains. Regardless of the method, escaping Barbados by sea continued into the late 18th and early 19th centuries, with the majority of these escapees being young men. Of course, all of this activity had harsh consequences. When it comes to the issue of punishment, Slave owners took marronage very seriously. The more frequently and longer a slave ran away, the harsher they were treated upon capture. The laws outlined strict punishments for these runaways, including public execution for repeat or long-term offenders, branding, and intense whipping. While the laws did specify the maximum punishments, slave owners often had a lot of freedom in deciding the severity of the punishment. Whipping was a common practice, and while there were limits set on the number of lashes, many slave owners did not adhere to them. In the late 1770s, Joseph Senhouse, an Englishman with family ties to Barbadian plantations, reported a specific instance involving a punished plantation slave who was threatened with punishment for escaping.
Being threatened with a severe punishment for absenting himself, threw himself headlong into a copper full of boiling cane liquor and was instantly scalded to death. Several instances of the like shocking nature has been known in this island.
Slave owners in Barbados also took it a step further, adopting certain disciplinary measures that became customary practices. For instance, after whipping a captured maroon, owners would often place iron collars with protruding spikes around their necks or chain their legs. These measures aimed to easily identify and further control the punished slaves. Frequent punishments for runaway slaves on Barbadian plantations included whipping, confinement in plantation dungeons, and the use of fetters or stocks. These disciplinary practices reflected the broader measures used in many New World slave societies. Despite Barbados's geographical constraints and strict rules, slaves consistently ran away from their masters, aiming to escape the oppressive system. Most Maroons yearned for a permanent escape, often due to harsh treatment, inadequate living conditions, or excessive labor, aiming to escape the oppressive system. Most Maroons yearned for a permanent escape, often due to harsh treatment, inadequate living conditions, or excessive labor demands. Barbadian slaves were known to be rebellious, strong, and resistant. While Barbados may not have had as many Maroons as larger islands like Jamaica, the act of running away was a significant form of resistance against the slavery system. These runaways, despite the risks of extreme punishment, continuously sought ways to regain control over their lives, highlighting the spirit of resistance amongst this unjustly enslaved population. Whether they made their escape by bush, in town, or over the choppy sea, their independent spirit continues to live on.
So you see here, Black America's the only thing that when there's slavery here in America. Black America's the only thing that was slavery in America. No. You see the proof we got here, Barbados had slavery also, and we ran away. So not just the Black Americans that had slavery. We had it rough in America before they even come here. Then again, a lot of slaves from here, that's here now, that was here, came from Barbados to America. So see, they had slaves in Barbados long before they come to America. Folks, it's all about knowing. It's all about fucking knowing. Once you know, they can't fuck with you. Anyway, folks, I'm out here. Peace out. Lots of love. Subscribe, share, comment, like the video. Much love.